Hello there everybody and welcome back to Movie Squirm. Today I'm going to be doing my recent horror watches. Now I haven't done one of these for a while. I usually do it every time I watch 10 horror movies, but I've been really busy with the Exorcist movies and Exorcist rankings, Pet Cemetery movies, new movies coming out. So it's been really hard to squeeze that in. However, I am going to do a double pack video here. So instead of 10 movies, I'm going to be talking about 20 horror movies here. Yes, a bigger feature of this series that I've been doing so far, which I quite enjoy, and I hope you all enjoy these videos too. And if you want to see more of these episodes of me just talking about random horror films, they will be in the link down below in the description. So this is going to be a pretty big video, so let's just get into the first horror movie that I watched since the last video I made. So first up, we do have The Nun 2. Yes, couple of months ago this came out now here at cinemas, and I actually did go to cinema to watch this one. I caught up with the Conjuring franchise just before watching this, and I wasn't a big fan of The Nun. It was one of my least liked movies in the franchise, alongside The Conjuring 3 and The Curse of La Llorona. So I wasn't particularly looking forward to this sequel all that much, but I've got to say it was probably one of the most surprising horror movies I've watched this year. Now this, instead of just following this one character, which was, I believe it's Teresa Farmiga in the first film, and her companion, here we have two kind of stories going on. So one of them is her and her new best friend, who are sent to find out what's really going on at this school, where they think this demon of the nun has resurfaced. And the other side of the movie is actually the school and what is actually going on there before they get there. So, it was two different things going on here instead of just the one, stuck in the one dull location like the first movie. And I gotta say, this one was gorgeously lit, visually impressive, and I've got to say the first movie is as well. But there were certain moments in this where characters are walking down little narrow alleyways and stuff, and all the streets are just lovely, looking lovely and really well lit. And I've got to say the story was very intriguing as well. This one definitely made more of an impact on Vasek, who is the nun demon. I think we explored him a little bit more here. The jump scares, although I'm not a big fan of them, worked a lot better here than the first movie. I think they were impressively done. One where we are at a magazine kiosk was the standout of the film for me. Unfortunately, the third act does fall apart a little bit there, just like the first movie as well. That was my least favourite part of that. Here, it does the same, but it's definitely a better third act than that. I gotta say, after watching this is probably my favourite movie outside of Conjuring 1 and 2. So I would probably have this in third place if I was ranking all the Conjuring films. I just had a really good time with it. I was quite surprised. I think that may have, improved my score a little bit there, that I gave it over on Letterboxd, and I reviewed it fully on this channel. I'll leave the link down below if you want to check it out, because I wasn't expecting too much. I don't know, but maybe my mind will change a little bit on rewatch. But however, after watching this at the cinema, me and my wife had a really good time with it. So that is The Nun 2. Next up, we have another sequel in a franchise, and this is The Exorcist 2. Now, before I get into this, I just want to say I have fully ranked the Exorcist franchise on this channel, and I've reviewed the first movie, the second movie, the third movie, and The Exorcist Believer. So I'll leave that Exorcist playlist and the Exorcist ranking down below in the description. So I won't say, anytime I come across an Exorcist movie, I won't say, oh, there's a link down below if you want to check it out. I'm just letting you all know that right now. So The Exorcist 2: The Heretic was a film I've watched a few times. I've seen glimpses of a few times when I was a kid, when it just appeared on TV. And I always thought, oh, The Exorcist 2. And every time I turned it on, it just looked so dull and stuff, and I never really got through watching it. So I'd only ever seen snippets of it before, but for the purpose of doing a review for it and ranking the series, I decided to sit down and watch The Exorcist 2 in full. And I had heard nothing but terrible things about this movie. And my God, it was the worst 2 hours of my entire life. My God, I absolutely hated this film. I don't know what the hell the director was thinking, writing, the writers and the director and the studio all came together and said, yeah, that'll do, we'll put that out in cinemas. What was going through their heads? I can't even attempt to explain what the story is going for here, because it was just a complete mess. I was getting kind of lost at times, and I had my full focus, man. But this is basically seeing Regan, who I think it's like 4 years later after the first movie, she believes this demon still lurks within inside her. So we've got characters who are trying to sit in this type of Insidious type deal where they try and go into the further, but into Regan's mind. That's what it looked like anyway. And they're trying to connect with this demon. And then we've got the main character, Father Lamont, who is exploring that, and then he's trying to find out what happened to Father Merrin, which leads him to Africa, and he learns about how this demon turned up there in the form of locusts. So he goes to meet this guy who battled the demon. And he's studying locusts now in case this demon ever comes back in the form of a locust. It was just a mess of a movie. And in the third act, we go to the house from the first movie, which was kind of cool when you think about it. But no, it was just characters being thrown around and screaming and locusts flying about. I just don't know what the hell this director was thinking. He said the first movie was the evil, so we wanted to make this one the good. And it's barely a horror movie. There's nothing scary going on here or anything. It's more of an adventure film, I feel. But my God, I just absolutely hated it. It was the most boring 2 hours of my life. I actually went to watch Killers of the Flower Moon. Now, I know that's not a horror movie, but that's 3.5 hours long. And The Exorcist 2, at its 2 hour runtime, seemed way longer than that film. So that's still... doesn't it? I remember pausing the movie about an hour in thinking, oh, there's got to be like half an hour to go here. And there was still another hour. I couldn't believe it. I was like, oh, another hour of this? Oh my God. It's just so poorly paced. The director and the filmmakers actually sat in a screening, and I believe this is meant to be true. And people who were invited to the screening, about 30 minutes in, actually said, the people who made this piece of shit are in the cinema now, and actually ran them down the street. And I hope no one got hurt, but that's just hilarious to me. That's how bad this movie is. Do not watch The Exorcist 2, The Heretic, unless you feel you absolutely have to. It doesn't really link to the first film. I think The Exorcist 3 forgets the second one anyway, so it's just the worst sequel to a horror movie ever. And you know what? I think it might just be the worst movie I've ever seen. Sleepaway Camp for the Survivor is probably number one, but that's barely a movie. That's a montage of clips. So as a fully fledged motion picture, The Exorcist 2 takes that crown. So I don't really do turkeys of the month or whatever in these videos, but this would definitely be it if I did that award. So that is The Exorcist 2, The Heretic. Next up, we have a vastly much improved film in The Exorcist 3. Now, William Peter Blatty, who wrote the novel, actually came and directed this movie. And he's only ever directed 2 movies, I believe, but he's done such a fine job here. And it's quite a shame that he hasn't gone on to direct more movies. What a talented guy, a novelist and a director. But this basically follows straight after the first movie. Well, I say straight after, it's 15 years later, but it feels like a more of a follow-on, because we pick up with the characters who was the detective in the first movie, who made friends with Father Dwyer at the end of the film. Detective Kinderman and Father Dwyer, they form a friendship at the end of the first movie, and it picks up within their friendship 15 years later. So it does feel like it's carrying on from the first film. It does feel linked. It feels way more linked than The Exorcist 2 anyway. And these murders are starting to pick up around the city. And they resemble the murders of the Gemini killer, who was put to death 15 years earlier. A lot happened 15 years earlier, didn't it? But these murders are coming up, and they're exactly like the Gemini killer's murders. So this Detective Kinderman decides to investigate all that. And it's kind of like a crime thriller movie with some supernatural shit thrown in there, just to spice it up a little bit and makes it a little bit more interesting. Now, this movie is I think it's slowly paced, but in a good way. You're kind of just taking it all in, taking up in this investigation, wondering what's going on, wondering why this is happening. And in the third act, it kind of goes for it and just goes fully ambitious and starts to throw things from left, right, and centre. And I gotta admit, I did get a little bit confused in the third act, and I had to read up what happened and go and watch the last 30 minutes again, and then it started to make sense a little bit there. So I wish that was kind of put together a little bit better, but overall, this is a pretty good detective thriller horror movie, if you like. Great performances from George C. Scott. I thought he's awesome in this film. Brad Dourif as the Gemini killer, who's just this mental patient in this cell, was awesome. Just absolutely brilliant. Scary, in fact. And there's a jump scene in this that is absolutely done to perfection. Like William Peter Blatty, guy who only directed 2 movies, put one of the best jump scares ever put to film in this movie. It's not your typical jump scare, and I knew it was coming because I'd seen the clips before, but I kind of looked at my wife as it was happening and it got to her. So it definitely still worked to this day. So yeah, pretty good movie, pretty good sequel, one of the best movies in this franchise for sure. That is The Exorcist 3. Next up, we have a new movie called It Lives Inside. Now, this uses Indian mythology to explain the origins of the demon that it's dealing with here. And this is basically following this young girl who used to be friends with this other girl at school, but she's got a little bit strange, so she's trying to distance herself from her a little bit there. And the girl comes up to her and says, "Look, I've got this demon in the jar, and it's trying to escape." And she just thinks she's absolutely crazy and wants nothing to do with it anymore. And then this demon does escape and start to come after this main girl who kind of didn't want anything to do with the girl who turned strange, and sort of inhabits this town that they live in, and she basically has to try and put a stop to it. Now, I thought this movie was quite unique, but also very generic. It done a lot of things that were different, especially the Indian mythology and the way it tries to build up the tension there, and we find out the history of this demon and stuff like that. I thought that was all done well. However, it does sort of throw a few generic jump scares in here, there, and there as well. So it can't really find the balance. There was an interesting aspect and dynamic with the main girl and her mother, because they're not really getting on in the film, and there's a good little arc between them two and how that all comes together in the movie. But overall, I think this movie could have been a little bit better if just thought about a little bit more. But there was a cool moment on some swings. I'll give it that. That was awesome. But the negatives just stay in my mind when I'm talking about the positives. So I think I give this like a 6 out of 10 on the channel. Again, link down below. I'll leave the link to all the movies I reviewed in this video. But overall, it wasn't bad. It was a decent enough movie. So that is It Lives Inside. Next up, we have the original Pet Sematary. Once again, I've reviewed this on the channel. Link down below. Yes, one of my favourite Stephen King adaptations. Even though I don't think it's more of the elite horror movies, it's one of the best Stephen King adaptations. But it's a very, very good horror movie. Now, this sees Louis Creed and his family move to this town, and they befriend a neighbour called Jug Crandall, who lives across the road, or should I say, he lives across the road. And he tells them about this cemetery that is this Indian burial ground when Lewis's cat dies. Because Jug Crandall feels bad for the daughter who's away on holiday while this cat dies, he tells Lewis about this cemetery where he can go and bury the cat and it will come back to life. But it comes back as a little arsehole, basically. And it's kind of just not the same cat, if you get me. And this sort of leads on to further things later on in the movie where people are being buried there and come back kind of like zombified, if you like. I won't say too much more than that if you haven't seen the movie, but this film has some genuinely creepy moments, especially when Rachel Creed, who is the wife of Louis Creed, is talking about her sister, Zelda, who she had to look after when she was younger. And some of the stories that Jug Crandall tells about what's happened in the town of Ludlow in the past. And also, as a father now, there's some very hard-hitting moments in this movie. I'm not going to get too much into it if you haven't seen the film, but Yeah, some of them really do hit home. I mean, this movie just goes for it. On this rewatch, I didn't actually realize how much it does go for it, but I think just as a father now, it hits home a little bit harder. Really, really good movie. I think Stephen King has just got an exceptional, smart mind. He's kind of a genius, and I just don't know where he thinks these ideas up. I really want to read the novel now. There's a lot of people in my review in the comments telling me how good the novel is and stuff, so I want to get into that. But really, on rewatch, I've watched this about 3 or 4 times now. It still stands up. Like I said, not one of the greatest horror movies ever made, but a very, very good horror film, and I think you should all check it out. So that is Pet Sematary. Next up, we have Pet Sematary 2. Now, I gotta be honest, Edward Furlong being in this, where he was kind of the same type of age as he was in Terminator 2, intrigued me the most because I love Terminator 2. And I wanted to see what else Edward Furlong was kind of capable of. I've only ever really seen him in American History X as well, which he was great in. So I just kind of wanted to see how he was in this movie. Now, he was a great protagonist in this film. It's a real shame how he didn't go on to become something that he had so much promise for, but it is what it is. And I think he moves to this new town or to stay with his father who lives in the town of Ludlow after his mother dies. And he befriends this guy at school who has got this absolutely insane stepfather played by Clancy Brown. But he befriends him anyway, and they discover this cemetery on the outskirts of the town. And one thing leads to another, and people are buried there and come back as assholes, basically. Now, I'm just going to say Clancy Brown is one of them people, and he is just a big arsehole in this movie. And what you get when you bury people at the cemetery, you get an even bigger arsehole. And he is just off the scale in this movie. He is having so much fun. You can just tell he is definitely the standout performer of Pet Sematary 2. But I liked how this all took place around Halloween. I liked how the kids around the campfire sort of told the stories of what happened with Louis Creed in the first film. And it's kind of like an urban legend and stuff like that. So it links nicely to the first film. And this is more of a fun vibe, if you like, than the first movie, because the first movie is very dark-hearted and it just has this really grim tone to it. But this one tries to be a bit more of an entertainment fest. However, there are some very hard-hitting moments once again in the third act, like things I didn't see coming. So it does go for it a little bit there, but it just has a more fun vibe than the first film. Not a better film. Well, it's a sequel that I thought was going to be terrible, and it was actually quite a fun watch. So that is Pet Sematary 2. Next up, we have a new movie that hit Disney Plus, and I heard a lot of people on social media talking about this, saying it was one of the best movies of the year, the best horror film of the year. So I thought, yeah, I'm checking this one out. And this is a home invasion film where this young girl lives in this remote house in the middle of the countryside, and it is invaded by aliens. Yes, which was an interesting concept, I thought. And there was some well-built moments in here with the aliens creeping around the house and stuff like that. But I think they showed you it too early. Like 5 or 10 minutes in, you see what these things look like, which took a lot away from the creepiness of the film. And I kind of just stopped caring after a little bit, and the movie sort of just carried on doing the same thing for a lot of the runtime. Now, there is a few mixed messages in here, especially towards the end. The end tries to be a little bit clever there, and it gets its message across, but it didn't quite work for me. I don't think it was anything standout or special, really. So for me, I thought this was a huge disappointment. After hearing everyone rave about this online, it's a watchable film, but for me, it's nowhere near my top 50 even of the year so far. So yeah, I didn't care too much for this one, unfortunately. That is, No One Will Save You. Next up, we have the Pet Sematary remake from 2019. Now, I remember going to the cinema to watch this and being fairly disappointed with it. I wanted to see Jug Crandall in this movie, talking with his out there accent, and John Lithgow didn't quite do that, so I was kind of disappointed. I also was looking forward to the Zelda scenes and being terrified by them, and they're just nowhere near as good as they are in the first movie. I mean, they're hardly even talked about in this one. So I just remember being disappointed by this film, because they were my big memories of the first one. However, on rewatch, my mind has totally changed, and I think this is a pretty good remake, actually. And I can appreciate John Lithgow's performance as Joe Crandall in this one a hell of a lot more than I did the first time. Why do the same thing? That was just me. That's my problem. And I think Jason Clarke, who plays Lewis Creed in this, is actually gives a little bit of a better performance. This has got better actors in here. I think it's visually stunning. I don't know if it's because I was watching this on 4K, but the movie was just brilliant. You know, gorgeous to look at. And, you know, it does carry all the dark tones from the first movie. The climax of this film is one of the most hard-hitting things I've seen in a movie. I totally forgot it ended like that, but I was like, holy shit. But what this movie does is shake it up a little bit. A certain character dies in the 1989 film, and in this one, they swap it around a little bit, much to the annoyance of lots of Pet Sematary fans who watched the trailer and seen this coming. But I didn't. I didn't know that was going to happen because I didn't watch the trailer going in. So I can imagine. I can agree why those people were so pissed off when they went to see the movie because the trailer gives everything away. Why did they do that in trailers? I don't know. But this one, yeah, I thought the visuals definitely helped with it, but it just flowed very nicely. I was having a lot of fun with this one, and I was watching it going, I love it when you rewatch a movie and it just has a better impact a second time round. And the third act totally goes for it, and that is where the best moments of the movie are, I feel. Not as good as the original, but I don't think it's that far off. It's definitely a good remake, and I'm just glad I watched it again because my mind has totally changed. And I know people who've messaged me and stuff and said they actually prefer this one over the original, and that is fair enough. Nostalgia is a heavy thing though, and I still, after rewatching them, do think the original does some things a little bit better there. But like I said, it's not far off. That is the Pet Sematary remake. Next up we have Saw X, another one I have reviewed on the channel, link down below. Now this, I didn't hold any hope for this, and if I said The Nun 2 was surprising, this has got to be the most surprising horror movie I've seen so far this year, because I absolutely loved this film. I thought it was fantastic the way they got John Kramer and made you sympathise with him, and I knew that going in, but I thought, there's no way I'm sympathising with this guy. No chance. I know what he turns into after the first movie, and this takes place between 1 and 2. There's no way I'm going to get on his side. And you know what? I couldn't help it. The movie got me on his side because he is dealing with some very sinister characters in this film. So this basically is him being told that his cancer can be cured. And these people sort of lie to him and pretend it's cured and then kind of do a runner on him and take all his money, basically. So they are just the worst, most vile characters you will see in a movie, especially the main one called Cecilia. Man, what a great performance by her, because I totally hated her. Like, she is one of the most vile characters I have ever seen in a movie, and I just could not wait for her to get the worst death imaginable. Not since the Queen in Game of Thrones have I hated a female character this much that I've seen on screen, but I absolutely hated this character so much. Now, this is a very well-built story for the first hour. It's not your typical Saw film where you're just getting in a trap and then you learn of this character's story and then we move on to the next trap. This is a well-built story for the first hour. Takes its time, well-paced, and then the second half of the movie is when we get into all them traps. So you're kind of watching the first half, knowing what's coming for the second half, and that was quite good anticipation for me. So Saw X was a generally nice surprise. Some of the traps were awesome as well. It definitely goes for the gore and gives you a new perspective on John Kramer. Tobin Bell put in probably his best performance in the entire franchise here. And you can tell he's still totally, he loves this character that he's portrayed on screen for so many movies. I think Saw 1 and 2 are still the best, but this one is probably in third place now as the best Saw movie out of all 10. A generally nice surprise and a lovely little treat for 2023. So that is Saw X. Next up we have Night of the Creeps. Now this is a movie I'd heard a lot about from some other YouTubers, especially Andy from Forgotten World of Movies. And I didn't even know this movie existed. Yes, a horror fan who has a horror channel had never heard of Night of the Creeps. Now, that is terrible from me. So I decided to pick this up on Blu-ray and check it out. And this was a really fun movie, a retro zombie type deal. I like to call it retro zombie vibe, really, where you just, it's kind of the stereotypical zombie, if you like, invading this high school, and we follow these two characters who are trying to get to the bottom of it, and it just carries that really 80s vibe, if you like. The makeup design is awesome on these zombies, and I just love how so much care went into the makeup and the effects of what they look like back in the 80s. You can just tell there's so much more heart in it now, but most of this would be CGI or something these days. And this follows, it's kind of like an infection that's going around the school, turning these people into zombies. And I really love the tagline of this film. It's good news, your date's here. Bad news is he's dead. So it's kind of a horror comedy, really. But there's some awesome things happening in this movie. Some great gore, some great kills. And just a really genuinely fun film. So I had a good time with this one. So that is Night of the Creeps. Next up, carrying on my Exorcist watches, we have Exorcist the Beginning. Now, we all know the story of this and Dominion. I'm not going to get too much into that. I do explain it more in my Exorcist ranking. But this one wasn't the greatest film for me, really. This follows Father Merrin, who is in Africa, and it's a prequel to The Exorcist, and how he discovers this church that has been buried around this village because it carries this curse and may have this demonic force inside of it because of this battle that happened hundreds of years ago. That sounds like quite an interesting concept, but I've got to say the movie is very slow paced. Father Merrin is also suffering from this PTSD from the war, which sort of gets in his way along the movie, you know, that keeps flashing up and stuff. And there's a little bit of a battle going on between the British Empire and these African villages. So the movie is ambitious, I'll give it that. But I came here for an Exorcist movie, and it doesn't really feel like an Exorcist prequel, in my opinion, apart from the third act where it does go into that a little bit, but the makeup design and stuff just isn't very good. And how can a movie from 1973 look better than this from 2004, is it, or something? Yeah, I mean, overall, it was a watchable movie, but I just didn't really connect with this one as much. And I kind of thought it'd be bad going in. And them CGI hyenas can just go straight to hell. Excuse the pun. So that is The Exorcist Beginning. Next up, we have Dominion, the prequel to The Exorcist, which is part of the story that I go into in my Exorcist ranking. But basically, they brought this out because they had a load of footage, and it's the same story as The Exorcist Beginning, really. And this one was a little bit worse for me than The Exorcist Beginning because this is just way more boring, I feel, even slower paced than the first film. However, the flip side to that is the third act is probably a little bit better than The Exorcist Beginning, so it's got that going for it. But this one focuses way too much on the African villages and the British Empire, the little war they've got going on. But it just feels even more of a less Exorcist prequel, if you like. This one just totally feels like it's doing its own thing. And I just didn't care for it. It was my least favourite movie in this franchise, just after The Exorcist to The Heretic. I just can't. The only time I'll probably ever visit these two movies again is if a new Exorcist movie comes out and I want to review them on the channel, just to fill that Exorcist review series, really. I didn't quite have time to review this one in the beginning. But yeah, just a very bland, boring film that doesn't feel like an Exorcist prequel, unfortunately. So yeah, that is Dominion, the prequel to The Exorcist. Next up, we have Totally Killer. Now, this is a movie that landed on Amazon Prime, and I had such a fun time with this one. It's a horror comedy that uses the Back to the Future aspect of things. So this young girl, there's a killer going around in the 80s who kills these three girls, and he was never caught. And like 30-40 years later, the killer has resurfaced and started killing again, and this young girl is transported back to the 80s. So she's got to kind of find out who this killer is and stop him before he starts killing people in the future. So yeah, it's like a Back to the Future concept, and it even mentions Back to the Future a few times in this film. She's going up to people going, "Have you seen Back to the Future? I'm in that movie now." And you know what? I just had a really fun time with this one. The dialogue is hilarious. There's some moments at times where I was laughing my ass off. Your typical high school characters, some are likable, some are assholes. And some really fun, genuine kills in here as well. You know, I just thought this movie came to have fun, and it felt like Happy Death Day and the movie Freaky. It's got that type of vibe going for it, basically. So I had a really fun time with this one, and I totally recommend it to some people who like this type of film, but I've seen other people absolutely hating this movie, and I just don't get that at all. But that is people's opinion, you know, but for me, this totally worked. So, excuse the pun. So that is totally killer. Next up, we have The Exorcist Believer. I was quite looking forward to this, actually, because David Gordon Green, I don't mind his Halloween trilogy. I like 2018. I like Ends. I'm one of them people who likes Ends. Didn't care too much for kills. So I was interested to see what he could do with this one. And unfortunately, he just wasn't the right man to do this. You know, tackling Halloween is one thing. We've had so many of them films. But tackling a masterpiece like The Exorcist is something else. And he just didn't quite know how to do this, in my opinion. The only thing that links this to The Exorcist is the title and Ellen Burstyn coming back for a small amount of time. And she didn't even want to come into this movie. She just done it for the paycheck for her charity that she supports. And I can see why, because they doubled her money after she rejected it the first time. So she feels like that's all going to good causes. So she's just here, even though she doesn't want to be, really. And this follows two girls who go missing from this town, and the parents are looking for them. And 3 days later, they turn up in a totally different personality because they've been possessed, basically. And the movie tries to do something different with possessing the two girls instead of the one, like the first movie did. And for me, that was interesting, but the execution is just so poor. And the third act just turned out to be another generic possession movie. That's all this is. Like I said, the only thing that linked this to The Exorcist is the title and Ellen Burstyn. This is just your everyday possession film. It reminded me more of The Pope's Exorcist, where characters are just being possessed and screaming and throwing things around. That is not scary to me. The build-up for this movie, the first hour, is very, very slow, and I've gone on record to say, as I'm getting older, I enjoy slower paced horror movies, but this one just is very, very snail paced, I feel. Leslie Odom Jr., definitely the best thing about this movie, the main protagonist. You know, I kind of latched onto him and felt his grief when his daughter went missing and stuff, and he's panicking looking for her. And he is a great actor, but he's not given much to work with here, but he is still definitely the biggest positive for this film for me. But the third act, man, it just falls flat on its face, and I don't know what the hell they were thinking with this film. I don't know if they were trying to cash grab it by tricking you, just by getting Ellen Burstyn in there, and trying to thrive off the greatest horror, the most popular horror movie ever made, putting that in the title and just trying to say, yeah, this will make money. But I don't believe it's done too well at the box office, to be honest. So overall, not a big fan of this film, unfortunately. That is The Exorcist Believer. Next up, we have Pet Sematary Bloodlines. Now, I gotta say, this is probably the most vanilla film in this entire video. It's a watchable movie, but it just doesn't really do anything interesting. This follows Jug Crandall as a young boy and what happened with Timmy Bateman. Now, we hear him talk about that story in the original Pet Sematary, where this kid came home from the war, his father buried him at the cemetery, and he came back and sort of wreaked havoc on the town, basically. That is that story. My main problem with it is it doesn't really throw anything from left field or throw anything in there that we kind of didn't see coming. It's just that story elongated for a 90-minute runtime, and it kind of just feels a little bit boring, to be honest. There's some good gore and stuff in there. The third act does elevate the film a little bit, but doesn't do anything too imaginative. Jackson White, who plays Jug Crandall, was definitely like the film, a vanilla character, not given much to work with and stuff. I mean, it doesn't even feel like Jug Crandall. Yeah, I mean, this is just a nothing movie to me. It was just made with Pet Sematary and Stephen King names put to it. And then Lindsay Beer, the director, I believe she's gone on record to say she's a big fan of the first movie and this was her vision. Fine, fine. But for me, I just think she could have expanded the universe a little bit there. I will say it's very nicely shot, a visually stunning movie, and I'm looking forward to seeing what she can do in future with maybe a better script or something, because she has definitely got talent behind the camera. But Pet Sematary Bloodlines, probably the most normal film of the year so far. Next up, we have VHS 85. Now, I've got to be honest, I wasn't looking forward to this too much because VHS 99 didn't do too much for me, and that's the only one I've seen in this franchise. I know there's like 7 or 8 of these now or something. But man, this was a hell of a surprise for me. I really enjoyed this one. So this is a found footage anthology film. And we've got 5 stories in here. One of the stories keeps linking in between all the other movies. Like that's when we see that one and that comes to fruition at the end. This kid who's just kind of watching TV. I'm not going to say what happens at the end. But the first one shows these characters who go to this lake and are being shot at by a sniper, which is really interesting, I thought. And that story kind of links to the 3rd or 4th story where we see this family who are this cult family. I won't say too much more of that, but I loved how that linked together. And this one of the other stories is like this technology where this woman is in the first phase of virtual reality, and you see these now with PlayStation and stuff like that. And she goes into this virtual reality, and this guy's explaining how it works, but it sort of all goes wrong. And we've got other stories in there as well. Like one of them is a disaster happening, and this follows this fire crew getting out of this disaster, but there's something demonic going on there as well. So for me, this movie really went for it with the gore and the sinisterism, and it got to me. Like, I'm not really scared by movies, but I've got to say, this one creeped me out a little bit, especially that story with the lake and linking to the 3rd and 4th one. The 3rd or 4th story in there. The way that linked together was awesome, I thought. And there's another story in here that is generally creepy as well. It's kind of this guy who's going around killing people in their house and tying women up and stuff and sending the police the videotapes. But that is kind of expanded on a little bit more as well when we get down to that, and that is, sort of throws it from something you may not see coming, which I really appreciated. So I had a great time with this one, and definitely better than last year's improvements, but beware, this is a bit of a creepy film, I thought. So that is VHS 85. Next up, we have Event Horizon. Now, this is a film that I watched back in the 90s on VHS, and I didn't really like it. I didn't quite get it, but I was a kid back then, and I've heard a lot of people talk about this movie, saying how it's a hidden gem and one of the most forgotten films of the 90s, and it deserves to be seen by everyone. So I actually went out and bought the 4K and thought I'd give it another go. And you know what? This did improve for me on this rewatch. I didn't really remember anything about it, to be honest, apart from Sam Neill going a little bit crazy. That's all I remember. But this follows a group of, a team who were on this vessel who get a distress call from this ship called Event Horizon, which went missing 7 years ago by Neptune, I believe. So they go and find out what happened there. And what they find out is quite sinister and creepy, really, and something I didn't quite see coming, even though I'd seen the movie years before. I totally forgot. And it is an interesting take on the science fiction horror aspect of things. Now, this takes a lot of inspiration from Alien with the distress call and stuff, and Aliens. I think there was a lot of characters in here trying to be characters of Aliens. Like, we've got Sam Neill, who's kind of like the bear character. And we've got this other character who's trying to be like Bill Paxton's character. You can just tell with all the jokes and the smart-ass comments and stuff. And we've got like Lawrence Fishburne, who's trying to be I forgot what the captain of the aliens and stuff. He's trying to be a little bit like him. So I think it took a lot of inspiration from Alien and Aliens. But I did appreciate in the 3rd act that it kind of done its own thing with this little bit of a ghost story going on. And I heard that they wanted to go full gore and full violence on this, but they kind of got it cut down. But there are so many edited shots in the third act where you can tell that they really did want to go for it. They just threw them in here a little bit for a few seconds. And that could have been an awesome movie if the damn BBFC or whatever it's called didn't cut this movie down. I hate the BBFC. Why are you there? Just let people release their movies in any form they want. Who cares? It's just a movie. So, yeah, Event Horizon, much better on rewatch, but I didn't love it. I just thought it was good. I give it 3 out of 5 on my letterbox. So that is Event Horizon. Next up, I watched Friday the 13th because of course, it was Friday the 13th. And what better way to celebrate that day with watching this movie? Now, I really do want to get round to the entire franchise. And when I review one of the big franchises on this channel, I think Friday the 13th is going to be the first one that I go to. Like when we got Nightmare on Elm Street, Scream and stuff, I think Friday the 13th might be the one. So hopefully I can get to that soon. If that's something you guys would like, definitely let me know. Because I'm really itching to go back to this franchise and sit through the entire lot. I still have never seen 5 or 7, which is a damn crime for me. But I'm really intrigued to go and watch this entire franchise now. My memory is very vague on them, apart from this movie, because I hold a lot of nostalgia for the first film. It's one of the very first horror movies I watched. I've seen it hundreds of times now. Okay, not hundreds, but a lot of times. And you know what? My mind just changes every time I watch this film. Sometimes I have fun with it. Sometimes I just see the flaws left, right, and center. I'm like, oh my God, it is so bad. But it's got charm, you know. It's a fun retro movie from the 80s that I just have a lot of fun with. And the third act with Mrs. Voorhees is great. You know, I always love that little battle between her and Alice. One of the best jump scares ever put to film, kind of like The Exorcist 3 in the end of the movie. I love that. And my big problem with this film, more than anything, is that it didn't end there. It's kind of all a dream. And I'm like, why did you put that in? It was one of my most infuriating scenes in a movie. Why did you have to make that a dream sequence? The movie should have just ended there. There's some fun kills in here, some fun characters, Kevin Bacon and stuff, and what happens to him with the little arrow through his neck. Man, I still can't sleep on my back after watching this film as a young kid on VHS. I always have to sleep either one side because this movie just comes into my head. I'm not even joking. So that is Friday the 13th. Next up, we have Cat's Eye from Stephen King, a movie I've owned on 4K for quite a bit, and I've always wanted to check this one out. And you know what? This is another anthology film where that's the problem with anthology movies. They're not really consistent. Most of the stories are either better or worse than the other one, and then it's very, very rare that you just get a home run of stories in these movies, isn't it? The first story seems James Woods wanting to quit smoking. I thought that was the best story out of the 3. And it was just so weird, this company that he goes to that makes him want to quit smoking. Like, they threaten to rape and kill his daughter and his wife and stuff if he has one cigarette. And there's people watching him from everywhere that he goes and stuff to make him quit. I just thought, this is a really interesting concept. The next story, we have this guy who can't stop betting, and he wants to bet on this guy to walk around the balcony on his building that he owns, because he's this totally rich guy, but he's an arsehole, and that sort of doesn't pan out too well for him. And the third story, definitely the worst one, was with Drew Barrymore, who's obsessed with this cat who comes into her house. But there's this little demon going around the house, causing havoc, and the family think it's the cat. That was definitely the weakest one by a mile, but the first 2 stories were pretty good. And yeah, it all follows it from this cat's perspective of what he sees, and that's how the stories kind of link together. It wasn't bad. I didn't love it. I didn't hate it. It was fine. So that is Cat's Eye. And last up, we have a family-friendly movie called Haunted Mansion. Yes, this came to Disney Plus. I missed it at the cinema, and I was kind of just wanting to wait for Disney Plus anyway. But this follows this guy who goes to this haunted mansion where this family have just moved in, and he sort of fakes that he can get rid of these ghosts with this camera that he's got, but then he soon finds out that these ghosts are real because he didn't believe it in the first place, and it's up to him, this family, Danny DeVito's character and everyone, to exorcise this house basically and get rid of these ghosts for this family. It's your typical Disney movie, what Disney movies do these days. I'm not a Disney hater or anything like that, but some of the things they do really annoy me. And it just plays it all very safe. There's all CGI everywhere and stuff, lots of green screen. I didn't love this film. It was way too long. You know, it could have been 90 minutes. It's 2 hours and 5 minutes for some reason. Lakeith Stanfield was quite good in this film, but I think he's better suited to more serious movies instead of family-friendly films like this. It didn't do too much for me. There was a few laughs here and there. It's a watchable film, but it kind of just fell through out there by Disney, I've got to be honest. So that is Haunted Mansion. Okay guys, hope you all enjoyed these recent horror watches. I'm on about 3 or 4 movies deep into my next one now. So after I watch 10 movies, I'll be doing another series. But I'm going to stick here my pick of the bunch. And for the pick of the bunch here, I'm going to go with Totally Killer. Yes, I had a good time with this one. And some people who give this a low score who are watching this may not be able to believe their eyes. But I'm going to give it to Totally Killer. One of the most fun, or some of the most fun I've had with a movie all year. Okay guys, hope you all enjoyed this video. What do you think of these horror watches? Don't forget to check out my Exorcist ranking, Pet Sematary ranking, all the reviews down below in the description. I'm sure there's going to be a big list there. Let me know what you thought of these films. Don't forget to give this video a like if you like horror and subscribe to this channel. It will really help me out. Thanks so much guys. You all take care and I'll see you all in the next video.